Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Barrios. I'm the president and chair of the DC Latino Caucus. I am thrilled to welcome you to a public meeting of the DC Latino Caucus. We're trying something new. Traditionally, our board meetings have been closed to the public, although we've had other opportunities for member engagement through things like endorsement forums and so forth. But in our attempt to increase our outreach and advocacy activities, we want to have more opportunities to work with the public and have them see what we're doing. And so this is our first opportunity to do that. I do want to give a special thank you to Eddie Crystal and Juan Ulloa, who are doing our IT support. Eddie in particular signed on at the very last minute because our vice president had a personal issue and she was unable to attend, and so we needed some backup support. So thank you, Eddie. And Juan, of course, as our amazing communications director, is also helping out tonight. This session is being live streamed to YouTube, and it is also being recorded. And after the recording is complete, either it or the live stream, our IT folks can tell us which, will end up residing on YouTube permanently and accessible to the public. So if you have any issues with being recorded, now would be a good time to depart. Like I said, the recording will be available for the public to view. We are going to record just the first portion of this meeting, which will be our guest speaker tonight that will be speaking to us about some local legislation. After that, we will move to an opportunity for the community to communicate with the Latino Caucus about any community concerns or issues you may have, and then we'll move on to board business. And when we do at that time, we will be turning off the recording. Anybody is welcome to stay, but at that point, it will be a meeting for the board members. So for our first segment, and I'll introduce our guest speaker in just a moment, I'm asking you to please feel free to leave any questions you may have in the Zoom chat. And as time goes on during the meeting, I may select questions to ask as time allows. I have asked Eddie to set everybody to mute so that we make sure that we keep the conversation focused where it needs to be, which is Councilmember Nadeau. Board members, including myself, have also prepared some questions that we may ask. So at this time, it is my pleasure, in fact, to introduce the Ward 1 Council Member, Ms. Brianne Nadeau. Ms. Nadeau has introduced legislation to allow permanent residents who are not yet citizens of the United States to have the right to vote in the District of Columbia's local elections. They will be able to vote for mayor, DC Council, State Board of Education, advisory neighborhood commissions, and attorney general. And these officials make decisions that impact the lives of both citizens and permanent residents on issues including housing, education, human services, and much more. Now, there are many members of our Latino community who are green card holders or who have visas or who otherwise have permission that allow them to reside in the United States and in the District of Columbia. So that makes this legislation of particular importance to us. Now, back in 2018, when this legislation was previously introduced, our caucus did vote to endorse and support it. And so our support continues now at this time. And so with that said, and without further ado, I introduce you to Councilmember Nadeau.
Thank you so much. It is wonderful to be here with you all tonight. Thank you for including me in your meeting and allowing me to speak about an issue that I know we all care about a lot. So over the past several years, voting rights have been a central topic of public policy conversations throughout the nation. And as we see in other parts of the country, legislators introducing bills that suppress votes of their most marginalized residents, here in the District of Columbia, we are marching in the opposite direction. And I'm really proud of that. We're seeking to establish a more... Hold on one second. Everyone, parenthood. We're seeking to establish a more inclusive democracy and expand the electorate by extending our voting rights to some of our non-citizen residents. This past June, as Joe mentioned, I, along with 6 of my colleagues, introduced the Local Resident Voting Rights Act of 2021. This legislation would extend the right to vote to permanent residents for the purposes of local elections. So that's the what. The why, you know, every day elected officials like me are making decisions about affordable housing, education, human services, and some of the voices in our community are missing in one of our most important democratic processes, and that's our electoral process. As council member, it's really important to me that I represent all the voices of the people that live in my ward. And so when a constituent contacts me, I don't ask them their immigration status. I don't ask them, you know, how long they've lived in the District of Columbia or where they're from. That shouldn't matter. But when it comes to feeling represented, people who are living here in a permanent way, people who have decided to make their homes here, they should have the right to have a voice in elections, because elections matter. And if they feel like they're not being properly heard, an election is a really good time to make that known. So I'm really excited about this. The district has long been a place that has welcomed immigrants in our community, and I think it's really past time to welcome their full participation in our institutions. So it would give permanent residents the right to vote in local elections. That would include mayor, chairman or member of the council, attorney general, member of the state board of ed, an advisory neighborhood commissioner, and any initiative, referendum, recall, or charter referendum on a district ballot. This is not a novel idea, by the way. Several jurisdictions across the country already have similar laws in the books. And in this area, 9 municipalities in Maryland, including College Park, Hyattsville, and Tacoma Park, allow for non-citizens to vote in local elections. San Francisco enacted a similar law in 2020. And then just this past summer, 2 cities in Vermont also did the same. And in the district, some version of this legislation has been introduced in the last 5 council periods, including this one. And so the former champion of this bill was Councilmember Grasso. But the first version of this legislation, fun fact, was introduced by then Councilmember Muriel Bowser in 2013. So it really seems like there's a lot of organic support for this bill. As I mentioned, when I introduced it this time around, there's 7 of us on the bill. That is a majority of the council. That seems to be an indicator that if it came to the full council, it would pass. And we've already begun hearing from community partners who've expressed their support for the legislation and the desire to work in coalition with folks who want to get this done. So I really look forward to working with you all on this. I appreciate that the caucus has been supportive of this for a very long time, even before I was the bill's author. And I'm here to just have an open dialogue with you about the bill and what it means and how we can work together on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. So at this time, anybody in the audience that has a question, please feel free to post it in the comments on the Zoom, and we will try our best to get through those. So let's start with, we have a few pre-prepared questions. So this act does have a long history, like you indicated, right? And you did reintroduce it in June of this year, and this goes back quite a number of years. So what do you feel that your, and perhaps some of your, speak mostly, of course, for yourself, but maybe some of the co-sponsors as well, what is the motivation for drafting and supporting this act right now?
Well, so we're at a really important moment in the district's history, and in the fact that we've come further than ever towards statehood, right? We are poised to get some action in the Senate after getting a favorable vote out of the House, and that's the farthest we've ever come. And, none of us know if we'll get across the finish line this Congress, but it's really encouraging. And so I think we have to be thinking holistically about if we're going to be in this moment and expand our voting rights on the national stage, we should also be expanding them organically locally. And so for me, the moment is now on this, in the same way the moment is now on statehood. And as I said earlier, people living in the district, they don't have representation in Congress, but they have us. And we matter so much more than in any other jurisdiction in the country because we are the duly elected leaders that are the council members are the city council, the county council, the state legislature. And so people's lives are impacted by what we do every day. And they should have a voice in who goes to the council and represents them, who sits in the mayor's seat to represent them, and who the attorney general is. So I think it's really important. I think the moment is now, and I'm excited that we're building momentum for it.
Thank you, council member. So as we've talked about, this bill has been introduced before and it hasn't passed. What would you say some of the historical impediments have been to passage in the past, whether or not they still apply today?
Honestly, I think the biggest impediment has always been that it's referral to the Judiciary Committee, which is a committee with a very large docket and a large agenda. And even really in the past 7 years in particular, my time on the council, a very heavy focus on reforming the way we approach public safety, reforming the way we approach criminal justice, gun violence, all of these incredibly heavy and urgent issues that I think sometimes take all the energy away from what are very non-controversial things that could probably be done quickly and easily, but for the sort of the mammoth thing that's in the queue ahead of it. And so it's certainly not for a lack of interest. The chair of the Judiciary Committee is a co-introducer this time. So I really hope that we can get it done.
Okay. A couple of questions from our audience now. So Austin Naughton from Ward 2 asks, along with this right to vote, will permanent residents also be participating in other civic duties such as jury duty?
So the answer is no for now. It's not something we explicitly are adding, but that could change. That is actually a federal process right now, but they use our voter rolls. So we'll see how that plays out in the future.
Okay. Ms. Kathy Chiron asks, please define permanent resident. Does that mean green card? And how long that they've been living here?
It does mean legal permanent resident green card. There is a specific definition in the code, but green card would be the most common application.
So would that extend also to things like people who are here like on H-1B or other visas? Maybe visas to work?
I don't think so. I'll get you a firm answer before we finish today, but I'm pretty sure it's really just the permanent. The LPR, the P in the LPR is the permanent, and that's, okay. Yeah, it's a particular status. No, okay. It would not. Yeah, it wouldn't be for the H-1B visas.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, and then Ms. Patricia Aguino, who is the Latino Caucus's outreach chair, asks, will this legislation allow permanent residents to participate in the public financing program if they chose to run for office?
So right now, this bill is similar to all the laws that have been passed across the country, begins with voting rights. It does not extend to the ability to run for office. I think it's a really important question and something we should examine. And I would really love it if somebody raised it at the hearing, because we should consider it for sure.
Okay. Thank you. There are several individuals who have just recently joined us. We're having a discussion with Ward 1 Councilmember Brianne Nadeau on legislation to extend voting rights in local elections to permanent residents. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions for the council member, please post them in the Zoom chat, and we will get to them. We seem to be getting through them at quite a clip. Okay. So the next question that we have is, so what can the general public, including the Latino Caucus, do to show their support for the act? Like, what would be most helpful?
So You know, sometimes there's a bill that's popular and uncontroversial, and so people just don't show up for the hearing because they think, well, you know, I don't really need to because everybody knows this is a good thing. It's not true. If it's important to you, you should show up to the hearing. So even if the caucus simply sends one representative that voices the consensus of the whole, that would be great. But it's also wonderful if individuals want to come and testify and say what it means to them and also what you think could be improved about it, right? It's certainly, to me, this is not about me having introduced the perfect bill. It's about me moving the idea forward and ensuring that voices can be heard throughout the legislative process to make it the best bill it can be. So folks should come with ideas and feedback if they think things need to be tweaked. And there is not a date for the hearing yet. One other thing would be I would say, we don't want to do like a whole campaign asking for the hearing, but it would certainly not hurt for the organization to reach out to the chairman and say, we'd really love a hearing on this bill. We'd love to come out and testify on it.
Okay. All right. Let me look through some of these other comments here. Okay, so Mr. Naughton has another comment or question. He says, full disclosure, I am married to someone with a green card, LPR. He has chosen to not apply for citizenship yet. So why should he obtain the right to vote? Are there categories of green card holders who are somehow blocked from having such access to applying for citizenship?
Well, it's a philosophical question and perhaps one that you guys have a debate on in your household. That sounds interesting. Please invite me for dinner one night. I'd love to be in the middle of that conversation. You know, the United States is really weird in the way that it treats voting rights, because in a lot of other countries, if you live there, you vote. It doesn't matter what your citizenship is. And it's really about engagement. So for me, as somebody who just wants more people engaged in the political process and also in government, it just makes sense that if you live here, you should have a voice. I get that not everybody feels that way, but that's the way that I feel. And, you know, there could be a lot of reasons people don't want to become citizens in the United States. Perhaps it's very meaningful to them to retain their citizenship somewhere else. But for however long you're here as a legal permanent resident, in my mind, I want you to have a full voice in democracy. So that's how I think about it.
Okay. Ms. Claudia Barahona, who is our vice president and was able to join us, ask, and I think you may think you've already answered this, is there a commitment already from judiciary to hold a hearing? I think the answer is not yet, right? That's why it would be worthwhile to reach out to the chairman.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. All right. Ms. Keish Laruaheri asks, I think that this is a great first step to expand voting rights. Thanks for introducing the bill. Just curious, how many permanent residents are there in DC, and do we know anything about their demographics?
There is a number for that. We've been looking for it. I'm not sure we have it at our fingertips, but I could tell you that according to the 2019 estimates from the US Census Bureau, about 55,000 district residents are non-citizens. So it would be a subset of that. And if we come across that number, we'll tell you too, because I know Keish is going to want to go register all of them and then make them members in another Democratic organization here in the District of Columbia and then turn them out. So we need to make sure that Keish has that number.
We have no idea what that organization might be. Thank you, Keish, for your question. Kathy Sharon says, just to remind everyone that the Vote 411 org website and phone app is available in English and in Spanish, and will show all voter and voting related info for any US address. So 2 things: make sure your voter registration is up to date, name, address, party, and 2, make sure that friends and family around the country are ready to vote too. I think that's great advice, you know, no matter where you're at. Thank you.
League of Women Voters.
So,
love it.
Absolutely. Okay, we have a question from Mr. Sam Bonar. What are your thoughts on extending voting to undocumented folks? I've heard that there is already a system, I think through healthcare, where DC or government has their information already. Also, I think I missed this, but yes, you did miss that the bill is not yet in the judiciary. Is it?
It's in the Judiciary
It
Committee.
is in the Judiciary Committee, right?
Yeah.
It's just that we haven't gotten a hearing scheduled yet.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
So it's a great question, right? So yes, the program for healthcare, it's called the Alliance, and that is our free healthcare program for residents who are undocumented. This is a tough one, not philosophically for me, but in my experience working with folks who have every reason not to trust the government and do not wish to be on another list. And so I think we should talk about it as a community and whether or not it's something that folks want and would utilize. And even if they don't, if it's worth making it available, I'm completely open to the conversation. I do not know if that would change the level of support in the council. I think everybody's very comfortable with legal permanent resident. I am not 100% sure where all my colleagues would stand on any immigrant status. I'm all for it. I'm also really interested in getting this component across the finish line. And so I think we would just need to have that conversation more holistically about whether the priority is getting this version done to expand voting rights in what I consider more of a sure thing, as opposed to something that could be more controversial and perhaps underutilized. And I don't have an opinion on which way to go. I think that's really a conversation that our immigrant serving organizations and representative organizations would need to sort of guide me on. But I'm always open, like I said, expanding voting rights. Look, you know, we're a sanctuary city, but that has not been the experience of every person living in the District of Columbia. We know there are still issues with local entities and really individuals within them that are cooperating with ICE. And under the Trump administration, where I had a situation with one of my constituents who was handed over to ICE by a DC government employee. And so people have valid reasons to not want to interact with government when they're undocumented. And so, you know, it's a big question in my mind as to whether or not that's the right thing if we're in the right moment. But I'm open to the conversation. That was more than you were asking for, but it's a kind of philosophical thing for me.
Thank you. So Arturo Griffiths asks, he says, saludos from Arturo. Thank you for this great initiative for our DC immigrants who are residents. In your proposal, would you be able to include TPS residents? And I will work hard to get this initiative through the City Council. Thank you very much.
I think we should raise it at the hearing and see how it goes. I think TPS is another great category that could be more, we could build consensus around. I think the only challenge with TPS is the T, and that it changes with each presidential administration who's protected, as we saw under Trump, and that there may be people under temporary protected status that, again, don't want any additional documentation of their presence here. So we just really have to be mindful of it. But if there are folks here under TPS that are wanting this, then that's something that I'm really interested in exploring.
Okay. Question from one of our board members. So this is on the issue of accessibility, which we know has been a continuing challenge, certainly for folks for whom English is not, or for whom Spanish may be the first language, or some other language may be a first language. So are there any provisions in the legislation to address such barriers, whether they be language barriers or they could be disability barriers that people are contending with in their daily lives? And is there anything in the legislation to ensure that such persons are able to participate fully?
So this is actually, okay, I think I understand the question here. So I happen to be the chair of the Committee on Human Services, which oversees the Department of Disability Services and the Office of Disability Rights. And one of the things that those agencies are tasked with is ensuring that elections are accessible. And so that's something that we actually get a pretty regular report on, is how are voting booths accessible, text on the ballots, et cetera. So that's something that we're constantly working on and improving here in the District of Columbia. Vote by mail, I think, has helped with that too, because it gives people more time with their ballot and that they can get assistance in filling it out and they can do it from home. It was another one of my bills.
Okay. Our board member, Anthony Musa, who's also our advocacy chair, asks, outside of attending the hearing, are there council members you recommend that we reach out to ask for their support?
Yes. So I would suggest reaching out to members of the Judiciary Committee, because the first hurdle in the council is that committee. So that's Councilmember Che, Councilmember Bonds, Councilmember Gray, and then Allen, and then there must be one more. So I'll get that really. But that's, in my mind, that's a really good way to go, because if you get, even if you have the chairman's support, Pinto, thank you, Sam. Pinto's the last one. If you have the chairman's support, he still can't move the bill out of committee if he doesn't have the votes. So you want to think strategically, everybody showing up to the hearing, but also then working those individual council members.
Okay. Margie Yeager, who is also on our board, asks, if the bill was successful, would it go into effect immediately or for the 22 election?
So the bill must go into effect 180 days after passage. And the Board of Elections will issue all the rules on how to do that. So it is unlikely that it would be for the 2022 primary. Impossible, perhaps. Someone do the math. And then, perhaps for the fall, if it made it through in time. But I would suggest it's probably more likely a 2024 thing.
Okay. I'm sorry, Kathy Sharon has a follow-up question and says, has there been any interaction with the Board of Elections to see if they are thinking of how implementation might go if the bill was passed, and are there some particular challenges that I guess would need to be addressed?
Not yet. They're aware of the bill. Obviously, it's been around a long time. We are always ready to mobilize when we see one of our bills moving to make sure that the implementing agency knows what's supposed to be done, because obviously we want to see these bills implemented. We don't just pass them and walk away. But the Board of Elections has taken a lot of feedback in general on the different things that we've been implementing, and I think they would on this as well. So that's certainly the implementation. It's not premature to talk about the implementation of something even in a hearing, because the Board of Elections will be there offering their testimony and also responding to the public testimony.
Okay. So not everyone may have experience or feel safe interacting with government and petitioning for something like this legislation. So other than showing up for a hearing, if somebody is shy or doesn't, or is new to being involved in the political process, what advice would you give them for how they might be able to be helpful?
So if a person is shy about testifying in person, but is still willing to share their thoughts, the council accepts testimony in writing and also by phone. You can leave a voicemail, which is kind of cool. That's a COVID innovation. And then, some committees do allow anonymous testimony for specific reasons, and this may be one of those. You want to avoid too much of that, because you don't want people to just sort of make assertions that they can't stand by in the public record. But I think generally speaking, if there was a reason, that could be accommodated. So
when a hearing was announced, I assume there would be instructions that if you want to testify by phone or by email or by other process, they would be made available at that time. Who needs to be contacted?
I'm sorry, Jose, I'm sorry, Joe, there was a lot going on in the background here. All of a sudden, that's why I was muted. Could you repeat that?
No problem.
Sorry,
So
Joe, thanks.
no problem. So when the hearing would get scheduled, would that be the time when instructions would be provided if somebody wants to write in or call in, leave a voicemail? Those instructions would happen at that time?
Yeah, and actually it's very cool that on our legislative website, you can subscribe to a bill, oddly. I mean, it's weird, but you can do it. So all of you political wonks already knew that. But if you go to the bill page, legislative page on the council, you scroll down and hit subscribe, you'll get a notification when there's a hearing. And then the notice will be there with all the instructions. Oh, and somebody also dropped into the chat some more info about the Judiciary Committee. Oh yes, Amir, thank you. And Amir, we can drop in the LIMS link. I think someone else asked if the bill was on my website, but if we drop in the LIMS link, then we don't need, it is on my website, but we don't even need my page.
Okay. Jacqueline Castañeda, who is our board member and our deputy comms officer and also our RCV liaison and champion, asks, will there be educational campaigns or outreach efforts to reach more DC residents to learn about this bill?
So that is also a place we could really use your help. Okay. You know, one of the things that we'll determine as we move through the legislative process is, do we want to add some of that into the bill? Do we want, really the question is, how fast do you want the bill to go into effect? If we create something attached to it that costs money, then we have to find the money in the next budget process. So it like adds time. So we have to keep all that stuff in mind, but we want people to register and we want to educate people about it so they will register. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, but I think that, you know, probably based on my experience working with the community that would benefit from this bill, a lot of the most effective outreach comes from trusted entities, trusted organizations that's serving the community. And so asking them to communicate to their lists, to their WhatsApps, you know, to their group chats, and to their constituents, I think is also a good free to us way to do it, and can help us move the bill along and also get everyone informed about it.
Keish asks an interesting question. Are there any council members who have expressed opposition to this bill?
So far, no, but it's early.
Okay. Okay, I think we have gone through the questions. If anyone has any additional questions, now would be a very good time to add them to the chat.
We've just been so thorough.
Yeah.
It's just a non-controversial topic in this group. I love it.
It is pretty non-controversial. It seems like a slam dunk.
We weren't going to have a heated debate. We knew that.
No, it wasn't going to be, no. Like certain other heated debates have been going on recently.
Indeed.
All right, last chance for anyone to ask any questions in the chat for Councilmember Nadeau. So Austin asks, what are the arguments against if not in this group?
I mean, I think we heard one already from a member, which is, you know, if you want to vote, you should become a citizen. But it's not my belief, but that's one of them.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Nadeau, on behalf of the Latino Caucus, I want to extend my thanks to you for taking the time to come before us and answer questions about this important legislation that impacts so many people in our community. I'm very grateful for your time, and I'm sure everyone else in the audience is as well. Thank you, Councilmember.
thank you so much for your leadership, to everyone for allowing me to participate tonight. I know that you have a big agenda, so we'll bow out and give you some extra time on that, and look forward to seeing you all again soon in person. I hope. It was really wonderful to be together last month. So thank you.
Absolutely. And if there is we talked about how the caucus can contribute to helping push this legislation forward. You did have ideas about that. If there's material that we can share with our members, we do have a large membership list, and we will be happy to provide that information forward. So
thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Councilmember, once again, for joining us this evening.